Hello learners, I hope you're all doing well. So finally, we've almost come to an end of our O-level biology course. Today we're going to be covering the last module of the course, which is the 17th module, that is inheritance. So in this video, we will be discussing section 1, in which we will be talking about monohybrid inheritance. Alright, now what is inheritance? Or we also call it heredity. So simply put, it is basically the process through which genetic information is passed down from the parents to the offspring. So basically, this genetic information is all the character traits that all living organisms possess. So if you take my example, I have a specific color of hair, which is black, and I have a specific color of eyes, which are brown. I also have a specific blood group, which is B. So all of these are actually character traits that have been passed down to me from my parents. So now if you can look at this picture, it's basically an old family picture, and yes, that grumpy looking girl is me. So basically when anyone sees this picture, they usually say that I look a lot like my dad, or some people also say that I look like my mom. Honestly, I do not see any resemblance at all between me and my parents in this picture, at least. But this is generally what we do, right? So we compare parents to their kids, and we see whether they resemble each other or not. And usually they do, but when we're kids, usually the resemblance is not so striking. But as we grow older, our physical features, they mature and they develop, and then we do usually end up looking like either of our parents. So how is this resemblance happening? This resemblance is due to the fact that all the character traits, the physical features that we possess, have been passed down to us by our parents. So our genetic information is very similar to that of our parents. Alright, so now it's time for a little bit of a history lesson. So basically, over time, the study of heredity has been a point of interest for so many people and so many scientists. But there was only one guy who managed to provide us with a more logical and a more modern approach towards the study of heredity, and he was named Gregor Mendel. Now, Mendel basically spent an almost unhealthy amount of time in his garden conducting experiments on different varieties of pea plants. And this is how he studied the process of inheritance. So basically what he did was, in each experiment, he chose 2 pea plants with one contrasting trait. So for example, he chose 2 pea plants based on the trait of height. So one of the pea plants was very tall and the other pea plant was a short or a dwarf plant. So again, the trait was the same, which was the height of the plant. Now similarly, in another experiment, he chose 2 pea plants based on the shape of their seeds. So one of the plants had seeds which were round, and the other plant had seeds which were wrinkled. So again, the trait was the same. Now basically, the inheritance that involves one contrasting trait is called monohybrid inheritance. And all of Mendel's work and all of his experiments were based on the concept of monohybrid inheritance. So let's quickly go and see how Mendel conducted all of his experiments and what conclusions he came to in the end. Alright, so what Mendel Saab did was that he conducted an experiment in his garden where he crossed a tall pea plant with a short pea plant. And then he planted these seeds from the cross and observed the traits of the resulting hybrids, which were all tall. Now, Mendel called these hybrids the F1 generation. Now, then what he did was that he allowed these F1 hybrids to self-fertilize and produce seeds. And then these seeds gave rise to the F2 generation. So in the F2 generation, as you can see, there a ratio of about 3 tall plants to 1 short plant was observed. So Mendel observed that one trait always appeared in the F1 hybrids, and that is basically the long stems. So Mendel called this trait dominant, and the other trait, which was the short stems, it seemed to disappear. But then this trait was called recessive. But then the recessive trait actually did reappear in about 1/4 of the total offspring of the F2 generation. As you can see, there were 3 tall plants and 1 short. So now Mendel Saab did not stop here. He actually was very interested in explaining these observations. So what he did was that he concluded that there are certain factors which are responsible for the transmission of certain characters, and these factors were known as genes. And he also concluded that each characteristic is actually controlled by a pair of factors. So the height of the pea plant was controlled by 2 factors, one the dominant and the recessive one, and only the dominant one will show its effect, right? So this is how Mendel conducted his experiment, and this is how he came up with the concept of monohybrid inheritance.